My parents used my inheritance for my brother's wedding, so I sued them. And what I did after the verdict left everyone speechless. My great-aunt was, hands down, the coolest person in our family. In a culture where no one really cared if women got an education, she thought it was total nonsense and made it her mission to change things. She lived in London with her dad, got herself educated, went to university, and even became a doctor. She didn't stop there, though. She moved to the United States with her husband, and they built a great life together. The thing is, she never forgot where she came from or what the women in our family were dealing with. She saw how everyone acted like girls didn't need to go to school, just get married, have kids, and call it a day. My great-aunt thought that was ridiculous. So, she used her own money to set up savings accounts for all her nieces and grandnieces to make sure we had a shot at going to school, even if no one else cared about it. She really believed in us, and I always thought that was pretty amazing. When she passed away, she left enough money for every girl in the family to at least get started on their education. The plan was simple: we'd use that money for college, and it would help us get ahead in life. For me and my sister, it was like a safety net. My sister didn't really care about it, though. She got married 2 years after high school and wasn't interested in going to college. Fine by her, I guess. I was different. I worked hard in school, and when I finally graduated, I went to the bank to access the money my great-aunt had left me. That's when everything started to go sideways. I'd heard stories of people losing their inheritances or getting cheated out of them, but I never thought that would happen to me. I remember standing there, looking at the balance on the account, and feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. There was about $133,000 left in the account. Don't get me wrong, $133,000 is still a lot of money, but it wasn't even close to what should have been there. I knew something was up. I'd heard how much my great-aunt had set aside, and this wasn't it. I felt a mix of shock and anger bubbling up inside me. How could it be gone? I'd been planning on using that money for college, and now it was almost gone. I went straight to my parents. I mean, who else could have touched the account? It didn't make sense. They acted all casual about it, like it wasn't a big deal at all. They straight up told me they needed the money, like that explained everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Needed the money for what? Turns out, they had used it to pay for my brother's wedding. You know, that super fancy wedding he had a couple of years ago that everyone in the family couldn't stop talking about. Yeah, they dipped into my college fund to pay for it. When they told me, I was beyond furious. I could barely believe it. Who just takes money meant for their kids' education and blows it on a wedding? My parents, apparently. The worst part? They acted like I was being unreasonable for being mad about it. They kept saying stuff like, it was for family, and your brother's wedding was important, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. I couldn't care less about how important the wedding was. It wasn't their money to take in the first place. My great-aunt left it for me to go to school, not for them to fund some over-the-top celebration. I felt betrayed. Honestly, I had been counting on that money to pay for school, and now I was stuck with barely enough to cover anything. I was mad at them, mad at my brother, mad at the whole situation. But my parents didn't get it. They just shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal. It was like they expected me to just suck it up and move on. But there was no way I was doing that. The thing that really got me was how casual they were about the whole thing. They didn't even apologize. It was like they thought they had the right to take that money, and I should just be okay with it because it was for family. I wasn't okay with it, not even close. I had plans, and those plans didn't include taking out a ton of student loans because my parents decided to blow my inheritance on a one-day event. At that moment, I knew things were never going to be the same between me and my parents. The trust was completely gone. I couldn't even look at them without feeling angry. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted my money back. They told me I was being overdramatic, that I should just let it go. But how could I? This wasn't just about the money, it was about respect. They didn't respect me or what my great-aunt wanted for me. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to scream at them, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. They clearly didn't care how I felt. So, I made a decision right then and there. I wasn't going to let this slide. If they thought they could just walk all over me and get away with it, they were wrong. I was done being the good kid who just took whatever was thrown at them. I was going to fight back, even if it meant standing up to my whole family. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. They might have thought I was just some dumb kid who didn't know how things worked, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Looking back, that moment at the bank was a turning point for me. It was the moment I realized that my parents weren't the people I thought they were. I always thought family was supposed to have your back, but clearly, that wasn't the case here. They were more interested in appearances and keeping up with the community than they were in doing right by me. But I wasn't going to be quiet about it. If they thought I'd just roll over, they didn't know me as well as they thought they did. After finding out that my parents used my college money for my brother's wedding, I couldn't just sit there and let it slide. I was fuming, and there was no way I was going to let them get away with what they did. The thing is, my parents didn't see it that way at all. They thought I was just making a big deal out of nothing. They told me to calm down and stop acting so dramatic. Yeah, like I was going to just be chill about my future being stolen. Sure. I remember sitting down with them after I found out about the money. I wanted to give them a chance to explain themselves, to maybe show a little bit of remorse or admit they'd made a mistake. I thought, maybe they'll apologize, maybe they didn't realize how much this was going to mess me up. But nope. My dad just sat there, all casual, like we were talking about some minor inconvenience. He goes, "We needed the money at the time, and your brother's wedding was important for the family." I stared at him, waiting for some sign that he realized how messed up that sounded, but nothing. He really thought I'd be fine with that explanation. I asked, "What about my future? What about what I needed? You didn't even think to ask me?" My mom chimed in with the whole family comes first speech. I've heard that nonsense my whole life, family, family, family. What they really meant was my brother comes first, and everyone else has to deal with it. I wasn't about to just take that without pushing back. So, I stood up and told them straight, "You stole from me. That money wasn't yours to take, and I want it back." I guess they weren't expecting that because my mom looked shocked for a second, but then she just shook her head and said I was being selfish. Selfish. Me, the person they just stole thousands of dollars from, the person who had worked hard all through high school to make sure I had a shot at college. Apparently, standing up for myself made me selfish in their eyes. That's when I realized there was no fixing this. They didn't care. They didn't see what they did as wrong, and they weren't going to make it right unless I forced them to. So, I made up my mind then and there, I was done with them. If they weren't going to do the right thing, I wasn't going to stick around and play happy family anymore. I didn't say anything else to them after that. I just went to my room, packed up some of my stuff, and left. I didn't have a big plan or anything, I just knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore, knowing how little they cared about me. I grabbed whatever clothes I could fit into a suitcase and called a friend to pick me up. I wasn't going to waste another second in a house where I clearly didn't matter. Walking out of that house felt weird. On one hand, I was angry, but on the other hand, there was this sense of relief, like I didn't have to deal with their nonsense anymore. I didn't have to pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. The second I walked out the door, it felt like I was finally taking control of my life for the first time. Of course, leaving didn't fix everything, far from it. I still had to figure out how I was going to pay for school. I didn't have much left in the bank after what my parents took, so I had no choice but to take out student loans. And let me tell you, that was a hard pill to swallow. I knew I'd be stuck paying those loans off for years, all because my parents decided a wedding was more important than my education. But even though I was stuck with the debt, I wasn't going to let them win. I made a promise to myself that I'd pay for school on my own if I had to, but I wasn't going to let them off the hook. They thought they could just take my money and move on like nothing happened, but I wasn't about to let that happen. I was done playing the role of the quiet, obedient daughter. They screwed me over, and I was going to make sure they paid for it, literally. So, after I left home, things just kept escalating. I didn't talk to my parents for a while after I moved out, but I wasn't done with them yet. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was the principle of it. They thought they could just take my college fund and get away with it because it was for family. I wasn't going to let them think that was okay. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I mean, they didn't even apologize or try to make things right. They just assumed I'd roll over and accept whatever they did. But I knew I couldn't let this go. If I didn't stand up for myself now, they'd think they could keep treating me like this. So, I decided I was going to sue them for the money they took. If that's what it took to make them pay me back, then fine. I wasn't going to back down. When I told a few people about my plan, I got a mix of reactions. My friends were totally on board. They all said it was the right thing to do, that my parents were wrong, and I shouldn't let them take advantage of me. But when word got around to my family, yeah, that's when things started getting messy. My family acted like I was the worst person in the world. It was like they were more upset about me suing my parents than the fact that my parents stole from me in the first place. The phone calls started almost immediately. My aunt called me first, trying to guilt trip me into dropping the whole thing. "This is family business," she said, "and you don't air family business in public." She kept saying that I was putting money above family and that I needed to think about the shame this was going to bring on everyone. She even threw in the whole respect your elders card, like that was going to change my mind. I told her straight up, they stole from me. This isn't about disrespecting anyone, it's about getting back what's mine. She didn't like that response, and we haven't spoken since. It wasn't just her, though. Cousins, uncles, even people I barely talked to before all of this started calling and texting, telling me I needed to drop the lawsuit and think about the family's reputation. The family's reputation, like I'm supposed to care about how we look after they screwed me over. The worst part was how my parents reacted. They didn't even try to deny what they did. Instead, they kept saying I was overreacting, that I should let it go, and that we could work something out. I told them, if you wanted to work something out, you should have thought about that before taking my money. They tried to tell me they'd pay me back eventually, but there was no way I was trusting them at that point. I wasn't born yesterday. That's when they started offering to pay me back in installments, like I was some sort of credit card company. They thought they could just drag this out, paying me a little bit here and there, and maybe I'd get tired of it and stop asking. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I told them straight up, if you don't want me to sue you, you're going to have to pay me back everything, and you're going to do it now. Of course, they didn't like that. My dad, especially, he called me ungrateful and selfish, saying they did what they had to do for the family and that I should be ashamed of myself for not understanding that. I just couldn't believe how blind they were to how wrong they'd been. They didn't see what they did as stealing. They saw it as doing what was best for the family, as if blowing thousands of dollars on a wedding was somehow more important than my education. The conversations got heated pretty quickly. My mom cried on the phone, saying I was going to tear the family apart. My dad tried to act tough, like I was the one in the wrong. It was the same nonsense they had been spouting since this all started. They kept acting like I was the problem, that I was the one causing all the drama. But I wasn't the one who took someone else's money without asking. I wasn't the one who spent my daughter's future on a wedding. It was around this time that my brother decided to get involved. He called me up, all calm and reasonable, like he was going to be the voice of reason in this whole mess. He said he understood why I was mad but that suing our parents was going too far. He told me I was just embarrassing the family and that this wasn't worth tearing us apart over. Then he made me an offer, if I dropped the lawsuit, he'd help pay for my college out of his own pocket. Now, I knew better than to trust him at this point. I wasn't about to let my future rest on some vague promise. So, I told him, fine. If you're serious, let's make it official. We'll write a contract, and you can pay for my school that way. He didn't like that one bit. He got all defensive, saying I was being ridiculous for not trusting him. I told him it was simple, if he really wanted to help, he'd have no problem putting it in writing. He called me an idiot for even suggesting it, and that was the end of that conversation. From then on, things just kept getting worse. My family acted like I was some kind of villain for even thinking about suing my parents. It was like they couldn't see that my parents had done something seriously wrong. Every time I talked to anyone from the family, it was the same thing, you're bringing shame on us. You're overreacting. You're tearing us apart. They didn't care about what happened to me or the fact that my parents had taken my money without asking. They just cared about how it looked to other people. It didn't take long for the whole community to find out about the lawsuit, and let me tell you, that was a whole other level of drama. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on the matter. I'd walk into a store, and people would give me side eye, like I'd done something horrible. Friends of the family would stop me in the street, trying to talk me out of it, telling me I was ruining my family's reputation. But the thing is, I didn't care anymore. I was done caring about what other people thought. I was done letting them dictate what I should do or how I should feel. The lawsuit wasn't just about the money at this point, it was about standing up for myself and making sure they knew I wasn't going to be walked all over. My family could be mad at me all they wanted. They could talk about shame and reputation and family business, but none of that changed the fact that my parents had done something wrong, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I guess the hardest part was realizing that to them, keeping up appearances was more important than doing the right thing. They didn't care about making things right with me. They just wanted me to shut up and let it go so they could pretend like nothing had happened. But I wasn't about to let that happen. No matter how much they tried to guilt trip me or call me selfish, I knew I was doing the right thing. I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug, and I definitely wasn't going to trust them to pay me back on their terms. If they wanted to fix this, they were going to have to do it my way or not at all. So, after the whole lawsuit thing started, my family pretty much went into full-on damage control mode. They weren't interested in making things right, they just wanted to save face and stop me from embarrassing them any further. It felt like every day I was getting some new message from a relative or family friend telling me how wrong I was for taking this public, how I was ruining our family's reputation, and how I needed to think about the shame I was bringing on everyone. But here's the thing, I didn't care anymore. If they were so worried about shame, they should have thought about that before they took my money and acted like it wasn't a big deal. Of course, my parents weren't going to make this easy. They kept calling, texting, trying to set up meetings where we could talk things out like adults. But we'd already been there. They had their chance to fix this before I took legal action, and they blew it. So now, the only thing I wanted to hear from them was how they were going to pay me back, and they weren't offering anything that made me trust them. My dad was the worst about it. Every time he called, it was the same old lecture: we're family. We don't do this to each other. He made it sound like I was betraying him by standing up for myself. He kept going on about how much the lawsuit was hurting our family's standing in the community, how people were talking, and how they were losing respect because of me. He even tried to guilt trip me, telling me I was causing my mom a lot of stress and that it was affecting her health. But honestly, I was past the point of caring. It wasn't my responsibility to fix their mistakes, and if they were so worried about the consequences, maybe they should have thought about that before they blew my college fund on a wedding. I didn't bother arguing with him anymore. Every time he started on one of his speeches, I'd just tell him, "You know how to fix this. Pay me back, and we can end this." But of course, he wouldn't listen. He'd just get mad and say I was being unreasonable, that I didn't understand what it meant to be part of a family. That was the part that really got to me, the way they twisted things around to make it sound like I was the bad guy, like somehow I was the one tearing the family apart when they were the ones who stole from me. It was like they couldn't even see how wrong they were. They were too busy worrying about what other people would think to even try to make things right. And it wasn't just my parents. My brother had his own way of making things worse. After his whole "I'll pay for your college" stunt fell through, he started playing the victim card. He went around telling everyone how I was ruining the family, like he had nothing to do with the mess in the first place. He acted like he didn't benefit from what our parents did, like his wedding didn't come at the cost of my future. The worst part was, people believed him. They saw him as this poor guy caught in the middle, just trying to keep the peace. And me? I was the one who wouldn't let things go, the one who was causing all the drama. It didn't matter that he'd been handed everything on a silver platter while I was left scrambling to figure out how to pay for school. All they saw was that I was taking my parents to court, and that made me the villain in their eyes. It got to the point where I couldn't even walk down the street without someone giving me side eye. People who I used to be close with wouldn't even talk to me anymore. They acted like I was some kind of outcast for not just falling in line and letting my parents walk all over me. It was frustrating, but at the same time, I felt this weird sense of freedom. Like, yeah, they were judging me, but I didn't care. I was finally standing up for myself, and if they didn't like it, that was their problem, not mine. The whole situation was a mess, though. Every family gathering was filled with tension, and I started avoiding them altogether. I wasn't about to sit around pretending like everything was fine while they all whispered behind my back. I knew what they were saying. They were calling me selfish, saying I was tearing the family apart for money. But it wasn't about the money anymore, it was about respect. I wasn't going to let them get away with treating me like I didn't matter. I think the hardest part was realizing just how little they cared about me. I always thought family was supposed to have your back, to support you when things got tough. But in my case, they were more interested in saving face than doing what was right. They didn't care about how much their actions had hurt me or how much I'd lost because of their choices. All they cared about was keeping up appearances. There were a few times when I questioned if I was doing the right thing. When you have everyone around you telling you you're wrong, it's hard not to second-guess yourself. But every time I thought about backing down, I reminded myself of what they did. They took something that was mine, something that my great-aunt left specifically for me, and they used it for their own benefit without even asking. If I didn't fight back, I'd be telling them it was okay to treat me like that, and I wasn't about to do that. I talked to my lawyer a lot during that time. They kept reassuring me that I had a strong case, that what my parents did was wrong and illegal. That helped keep me focused, knowing that I wasn't just being dramatic or unreasonable. I had a right to stand up for myself, no matter what my family said. As the lawsuit dragged on, the distance between me and my family grew. It became clear that there was no coming back from this. They weren't going to forgive me for taking things this far, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted their forgiveness. I didn't want to be part of a family that didn't value me or my future. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the money. It was about the way they saw me, the way they treated me like I was less important than my brother, like my education and my future didn't matter. They'd always favored him, always put him first, and I was done being second best. I started focusing on my own life, on figuring out how to move forward without them. It wasn't easy, but it felt good to finally put myself first for once. I knew the lawsuit was going to take time, but I was ready to see it through to the end. If my family wanted to think I was the bad guy, that was fine by me. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. In the end, I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Alright, so after months of stress, countless arguments, and feeling like I was at war with my own family, It finally came to an end. The lawsuit that had everyone in my family so worked up? Yeah, it went in my favor. I won. But the victory came with a cost, a pretty heavy one, if I'm honest. Let me break it down. The moment I heard the news that I'd won, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. It was like all the frustration and anger I'd been carrying around was finally justified. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't overreacting like everyone kept telling me. What my parents did was wrong, and now, legally, they had to pay me back for it. But that feeling of relief didn't last long. See, winning the lawsuit meant that my parents had to come up with the money they took, and we're not talking about a small amount. They owed me thousands. At first, they tried to downplay it, like the court's decision wasn't a big deal and they'd figure something out. But figuring something out meant they had to mortgage one of their properties to pay me back. And let me tell you, that caused a whole new level of chaos in the family. When word got out that they had to mortgage their property, everyone freaked out. My relatives couldn't believe it. Suddenly, I wasn't just the girl who sued her parents, I was the reason they had to mortgage their house. The whispers started up again, and people were treating me like I had done something unforgivable. But here's the thing, I didn't force them to take my money in the first place. If they hadn't stolen from me, they wouldn't be in this situation. I still remember when my mom called me after they finalized the mortgage. She was crying, saying how ashamed she was, how this was all my fault, and how they never thought it would come to this. She made it sound like I was the villain in some tragic story, like I had somehow ruined their lives. But in reality, they did this to themselves. I wasn't the one who decided to take the money without asking. I wasn't the one who chose to prioritize a wedding over my future. Even though I knew I was in the right, it still hit me hard. I mean, no one wants to be at odds with their family. I never imagined I'd end up here, with my parents resenting me and most of my relatives refusing to talk to me. It's a weird feeling, being so disconnected from the people you've known your whole life. But honestly, I was okay with it. I'd rather be alone than be surrounded by people who didn't respect me. The way I saw it, if my family couldn't understand why I did what I did, then maybe it was time to cut ties for good. I had spent too long being treated like I didn't matter, and I wasn't about to go back to that just to keep the peace. My friends, on the other hand, were incredible. They had my back through the whole thing, reminding me that I wasn't crazy, that I was doing the right thing, even when my family made me doubt myself. Most of them didn't come from the same cultural background as me, so they didn't fully understand the pressure I was under to stay quiet and let things go. But they knew enough to see that I was being treated unfairly, and that meant everything to me. I stopped getting invited to family gatherings, and the few people who still talked to me did so reluctantly, like they were afraid of being seen with me. My brother? Yeah, he's still acting like the victim in all of this. But I'm done with him. He's not someone I can trust, and I've accepted that. The funny thing is, in a weird way, I feel freer now than I ever have. I'm no longer tied to their expectations, their constant need for me to be the good daughter who sacrifices everything for the family. I don't have to pretend anymore, and that's been the best part of all of this. I've also made sure that the other young women in my family, my cousins, nieces, have locked down their education funds. I've warned them not to trust anyone with access to those accounts because I don't want them to end up in the same position I was in. If nothing else, at least I can help make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. Looking back, I know I made the right choice. Was it easy? No. But it was necessary. My parents needed to be held accountable, and if that meant being labeled the black sheep of the family, then so be it. I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, I've learned that standing up for yourself, even when it feels like the whole world is against you, is worth it. I'm moving forward now, and honestly, I've never felt more confident in my own decisions. I've got my money back, I'm paying off my student loans, and I'm building the life I want for myself without their interference. And you know what? That feels pretty darn good. So, after the lawsuit wrapped up, you'd think my family would just let things be, right? Like, I'd won, they'd paid me back, and we'd all move on with our lives. But no, that's not how my family works. Even after everything, they still tried to find ways to pull me back into their nonsense. And of course, it all came down to more entitled behavior from their side. First off, my parents didn't even give me a proper apology after the court decision. You'd think after losing in court and having to mortgage their property to pay me back, they'd at least say, "Sorry for stealing your college fund." But nope. Instead, they acted like I was the one who owed them an apology for making them go through all of this. My dad, in particular, couldn't stop himself from making snide comments whenever we did speak. Comments like, "It's a shame that our own daughter would put us through this after everything we've done for her." Everything they've done for me? That was the real kicker. They honestly believed they were still the victims in this whole mess. My mom even started going around to extended family, telling them how I was ruining their retirement plans because of what they had to pay me. Like, what? They stole my money, and thought I should care about their retirement plans now? Give me a break. But it didn't stop there. About a month after the court decision, my brother reached out. I hadn't spoken to him since the lawsuit started, and honestly, I didn't expect to hear from him anytime soon. But apparently, he had something on his mind. He called me up, acting like everything was fine, and then hit me with this request. He asked me to help pay back the mortgage my parents had taken out because of the lawsuit. Yeah, you heard that right. He thought it'd be a good idea for me to pitch in and help pay back the loan my parents took out to give me my own money back. He acted like it was my responsibility to make sure our parents weren't struggling financially, even though it was entirely their fault in the first place. When I asked him why he thought I'd do something like that, he had the nerve to say, "Well, you got your money, didn't you? The least you could do is help them out now that things are hard for them." He seriously couldn't wrap his head around the fact that this was their problem, not mine. I told him straight up, if they hadn't taken my college fund in the first place, they wouldn't be in this mess. It's not my job to fix the situation they created. He didn't like that response. He kept pushing, saying how ungrateful I was and how, as a family, we should support each other in hard times. Funny how that support only seemed to go one way, though. When I needed help with college, they took my money and left me to figure it out on my own. But now that they were struggling, I was suddenly supposed to come to their rescue? Yeah, no thanks. That wasn't the last of it, though. My dad, being the stubborn guy he is, decided to take another shot at getting me to back down. One weekend, I got a call from him out of the blue, saying we should put the past behind us and rebuild the family. At first, I thought maybe he was finally ready to take some responsibility for what happened, maybe he'd apologize or show some kind of remorse. But of course, that's not how it went. Instead, he told me that the way to rebuild the family was for me to drop all the remaining hard feelings and help them with their financial situation. He wanted me to put a portion of the money I'd won back into the family account, like nothing had ever happened. He even had the nerve to suggest that we start fresh by combining all our finances again so we could help each other out whenever someone was in need. I couldn't believe it. After everything they did, after stealing from me, taking me to court, and refusing to admit they were wrong, he still expected me to just trust them again with my money. The guy really thought I'd just hand over my hard-earned cash and pretend like they didn't already screw me over once. I flat out refused, of course. I told him there was no way I was ever trusting them with my money again and that if they wanted to rebuild anything, they could start by taking responsibility for what they did. He didn't like that either. He went on about how I was tearing the family apart and how I was being selfish by holding on to the past. But honestly, at that point, I was done caring about what he thought. It wasn't just my parents, either. Even my extended family got in on the entitled nonsense. At a family wedding, one of the few I actually got invited to, one of my aunts pulled me aside and told me how disappointed she was in me for choosing money over family. She said that everyone was talking about how I'd embarrassed my parents and how I should have let it go for the sake of peace. I just stared at her and asked, "Would you have let them take your money for someone else's wedding?" She didn't have an answer to that. I guess that's the thing with entitled people. They expect you to just sit back and let them take advantage of you, but the moment you stand up for yourself, you're the villain. It was frustrating, but at the same time, I felt more certain than ever that I'd done the right thing. If standing up for myself meant I had to be the bad guy in their eyes, so be it. By the end of all this, I realized that no matter how much they tried to guilt-trip me or act like I owed them something, I didn't. They were the ones who crossed the line, and I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their mess.